The chandelier in the Fairmont Hotel's grand ballroom cast dancing shadows across the sea of champagne flutes and designer dresses. Sophia Martinez adjusted her simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, and tried to blend into the crowd of her cousin Victoria's high society friends. At 28, Victoria had somehow managed to build a lifestyle that screamed old money, despite the fact that our family had been solidly middle class for generations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria's voice rang out across the ballroom, amplified by the microphone in her perfectly manicured hand. Her golden hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her emerald green gown probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Thank you all for celebrating my 28th birthday with me tonight." The crowd erupted in applause, and I found myself clapping along, though something cold was already settling in my stomach. I'd been to enough family gatherings to recognize the signs, the way Victoria's eyes swept across the room, cataloging who was important enough to acknowledge. "I want to take a moment to thank the special people in my life," Victoria continued, her voice taking on that practiced sweetness she'd perfected since childhood. "First, my darling husband Marcus, who made this incredible evening possible." She gestured toward her husband, a silver-haired man 20 years her senior, who owned half the commercial real estate in the city. He raised his glass with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "My beautiful mother, Aunt Catherine, who taught me that grace and elegance are a woman's greatest assets." Victoria's mother, my father's sister, beamed from her seat at the head table, her own champagne glass catching the light. "My dear friends from the country club, who've become like family to me." Another sweep of acknowledgement, another round of polite applause. I stood there, drink in hand, waiting for my name, waiting for some acknowledgement that we'd grown up together, that I'd been the one to help her with her math homework when she was struggling in high school, that I'd been her maid of honor when she married Marcus 3 years ago. And finally, Victoria's voice rose with emotion. "I want to thank my beloved grandmother, who taught me that family is everything and whose wisdom guides me every day, even though she's no longer with us." The crowd awed appropriately. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a delicate handkerchief, though I noticed no actual tears fell. She'd always been good at that, the performance of emotion without the mess of actually feeling it. "So please raise your glasses to another year of blessings, love, and the family that makes it all worthwhile." The champagne glasses rose in unison. "To Victoria," the crowd chorused. I raised my glass too, though my hand trembled slightly. 28 years of family gatherings, and I'd just been erased from existence, not even a generic "and to all my family members who could be here tonight." Nothing. As the crowd dispersed back into smaller conversational groups, I made my way toward the bar, needing something stronger than champagne. The bartender, a kind-looking man in his 50s, must have noticed my expression. "Rough night?" he asked as he poured me a whiskey neat. "Something like that," I murmured, taking a sip and letting the burn distract me from the humiliation. "Tell me, do you ever have those moments where you suddenly see everything clearly? Like you've been living in a fog and someone just turned on a floodlight?" He chuckled softly. "More often than I'd like to admit. Those moments can be pretty painful. Or liberating," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. From across the room, I watched Victoria hold court with her guests, graciously accepting their compliments and birthday wishes. She was in her element, the center of attention, the beloved princess of the family. Aunt Catherine hovered nearby, basking in reflected glory, occasionally interjecting with stories about Victoria's latest charity work or her husband's business successes. Marcus, I noticed, had retreated to a corner with several other older men, deep in conversation about something that required serious expressions and occasional gestures toward their phones. Even at his wife's birthday party, business came first. "Sophia!" a familiar voice called out, and I turned to see my cousin James approaching with his wife Linda. James was Victoria's older brother, and unlike his sister, he'd always been genuinely kind to me. "I was hoping I'd see you here." "Hi, James." "Linda." I forced a smile. "Great party." Victoria certainly knows how to throw them, Linda said, though something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely impressed. I have to admit I was surprised when she didn't mention you in her toast. You two used to be so close. James shot his wife a warning look, but the damage was done. Someone had noticed. Someone had found it odd. Well, you know how it is, I said, taking another sip of whiskey. These things happen. But Linda wasn't letting it go. I mean, you were practically raised together. Remember when you used to spend every summer at your grandmother's house? You and Victoria were inseparable. Oh, that was a long time ago, I said quietly. Still, James interjected, clearly trying to smooth things over. Blood is blood, right? Family's family. I looked at him, really looked at him. James had always been the peacekeeper, the one who tried to keep everyone happy. He was probably genuinely confused by his sister's snub, but he'd never challenge her about it. None of them would. You know what? I said, setting down my empty glass. You're absolutely right. Family is family. Something in my tone must have caught their attention because both James and Linda gave me curious looks. I think I'm going to step outside for some air, I continued. It's getting a bit stuffy in here. I made my way through the crowd, past the ice sculptures and the elaborate flower arrangements, past Victoria's circle of admirers, past Aunt Catherine's proud smile. Outside on the hotel's terrace, the cool night air hit my face like a slap of reality. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. David Chen, my friend from law school, who now worked as a paralegal at one of the city's most prestigious firms. We'd kept in touch over the years, often meeting for coffee to complain about our respective careers. Me as a struggling freelance journalist, him as an overworked legal assistant. Dave, I said when he answered. It's Sophia. I know it's late, but I need to ask you something. Sophia, what's up? You sound weird. I need to know about probate records. Are they public? There was a pause. Probate records? Yeah, they're public once the will goes through probate court. Why? Hypothetically, if someone wanted to get a copy of a will that had already been probated, how would they go about it? Another pause, longer this time. Sophia, what are you planning? Nothing illegal, I said quickly. I need to understand some things about my family. About what happened when my grandmother died. Your grandmother? The one who passed away last year? Yeah. I leaned against the terrace railing, looking out over the city lights. Dave, I think there are things about her will that I don't know. Things that maybe other people don't know either. Okay, he said slowly. If you really want to see it, you can request a copy from the probate court. You'll need to know which county it was filed in, and there might be a small fee. But Sophia, be careful. Sometimes knowing the truth about family money can be complicated. More complicated than being treated like I don't exist. What happened? I told him about the toast, about the casual erasure, about the growing feeling that I'd been living in a carefully constructed lie. As I spoke, I could feel my resolve hardening. I'll help you, Dave said finally, but promise me you'll think carefully about what you're going to do with whatever you find. I promise, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I meant them. When I returned to the party, Victoria was cutting her elaborate 3-tiered cake, while the photographer captured every moment. She looked radiant, surrounded by love and luxury, secure in her position as the family's golden child. But I was already planning my next move. The county courthouse smelled like old paper and institutional coffee. I'd been there since they opened at 8 a.m., armed with the information Dave had helped me gather, my grandmother's full legal name, her date of death, and the approximate date her will would have been filed for probate. Margaret Elena Vasquez, I told the clerk behind the bulletproof glass, died March 15, 2024. I need a copy of her probated will. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain, gave me the bored look of someone who'd processed thousands of these requests. Relationship to the deceased? Granddaughter. ID and $25. I slid my driver's license and a 20 and a 5 through the slot. She examined my ID, comparing my face to the photo, then typed something into her computer. "It'll take about 10 minutes. Have a seat." "Issam." I found a hard plastic chair in the waiting area and tried to calm my nerves. Around me, other people waited for their own pieces of legal documentation. Death certificates, marriage licenses, court records. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a slightly greenish tint. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How was Victoria's party? I'm sorry I couldn't make it. This flu is really hanging on." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. It was illuminating. "Feel better, Mom." She'd been invited, of course. The whole family had been invited, but my mother had been genuinely sick, and at 55, she wasn't bouncing back from illnesses the way she used to. Part of me was glad she hadn't been there to witness my public humiliation. Vasquez. I looked up to see the clerk holding a manila envelope. "That'll be everything," she said, as I approached the window. My hands shook slightly as I took the envelope. Whatever was inside had the power to change everything, or nothing. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe Grandma had left everything to Victoria fair and square, and I was just a bitter, jealous cousin looking for reasons to feel victimized. I waited until I was in my car before opening the envelope. The will was thick, much thicker than I'd expected. Legal documents were always verbose, but this seemed excessive. I flipped to the first page. Last will and testament of Margaret Elena Vasquez. My grandmother's signature was there at the bottom, along with the signatures of 2 witnesses and a notary. The date was February 14th, 2024, just a month before she died. That was odd. As far as I knew, she'd been in relatively good health up until her final illness. Why would she have updated her will so close to her death? I flipped through the pages, scanning for the meat of the document, the part that outlined who got what. There were the usual legal formalities, explanations of terms, provisions for if beneficiaries died before her. And then, on page 7, I found it. Article 4, specific bequests to my beloved granddaughter Victoria Catherine Reeves. I leave my home at 1247 Maple Street, along with all furnishings, artwork and personal effects contained therein, as well as the sum of $50,000 from my checking account. To my beloved grandson James Michael Reeves, I leave the sum of $50,000 from my checking account. To my beloved granddaughter, Sophia Marie Martinez, I leave the sum of $500,000 from my investment accounts, along with my jewelry collection and all family photographs and documents. The remainder of my estate, including all other investment accounts, stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings, shall be divided equally among my 3 grandchildren, Victoria Catherine Reeves, James Michael Reeves, and Sophia Marie Martinez. I read it again, then again. The words didn't change. $500,000 plus jewelry, plus a third of whatever remained in her estate. My hands started trembling so badly I nearly dropped the papers. This couldn't be right. At the funeral, Aunt Catherine had made it clear that Victoria was inheriting the house and taking care of everything. She'd spoken about Grandma's wish for Victoria to carry on the family legacy. There had been no mention of any inheritance for me or James. I flipped to the next page, looking for more details about the remainder of the estate. What I found made my blood run cold. Note, at the time of this will's execution, the estimated value of my investment portfolio is approximately $2.3 million. This includes stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and certificates of deposit held at various financial institutions. A complete list of all accounts and holdings is attached as Exhibit A, $2.3 million, plus the house, which had to be worth at least $400,000 in today's market. If the will was accurate, each of us should have inherited around $800,000, plus our individual bequests. Victoria should have gotten the house and $50,000 cash for a total of about $1.25 million. James and I should have each gotten around $1.3 million. But that wasn't what had happened, not even close. I thought back to the funeral, to the conversations I'd overheard. Victoria talking about how she'd have to figure out what to do with all of Grandma's old things. Aunt Catherine mentioning that Victoria was being so generous by keeping the family home instead of selling it. The general assumption that Victoria had inherited everything and that she was graciously allowing the family to take small mementos. I'd taken a few photos and one of Grandma's scarves. That was it. My phone rang, making me jump. Dave's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "How did it go? Did you get the will?" "Dave," I said, staring at the papers in my lap. "I think my family stole from me." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" I think they committed fraud. I think they hid the real will and pretended Grandma left everything to Victoria." "Whoa, slow down. What exactly does the will say?" I read him the relevant sections, my voice growing steadier with each word. By the time I finished, I was angry instead of shocked. "Jesus," Dave breathed. "Sophia, if what you're saying is true, if they deliberately concealed your inheritance from you, that's not just fraud, that's a felony. What do I do?" "First, you need to calm down and think this through. Are you sure this is the will that was actually probated? Sometimes people have multiple wills, and only the most recent one is valid. The date on this one is February 14th, 2024, a month before she died. And when did the probate process happen? According to the file, it was submitted to the court in May 2024. Victoria was listed as the executor, so Victoria was the one who submitted the will to the court. Yes? Then either she submitted this will and lied to the family about what it said, or she submitted a different will entirely, and this one never went through probate. How can I find out which one it was? The probate court should have records of exactly what was submitted. But Sophia, if she submitted this will and then distributed the assets differently than what it specified, that's embezzlement. That's serious criminal territory. I leaned back in my car seat, staring up at the courthouse through my windshield. "Dave, I need to know everything. I need to know exactly what happened and who knew about it." "I can help you with that. But first, you need to decide what you're prepared to do with this information. Because once you start pulling this thread, there's no putting it back." "They erased me," I said quietly. "At the party last night, Victoria gave this big toast thanking everyone who mattered to her. She thanked people she'd known for 6 months. She thanked her dead grandmother, but she didn't mention me at all, like I didn't exist, like I never existed. And now you know why. Now I know why. I thought about Victoria's emerald gown, about the chandelier and the champagne and the photographer capturing every perfect moment. I thought about her house, Grandma's house, and how she'd redecorated it completely, erasing every trace of the woman who'd raised us both. "Dave, I want to know everything, and then I want them to pay." "Okay," he said, "but we're going to do this right. We're going to be careful, and we're going to be smart, and we're going to make sure we have absolutely everything we need before we make any moves." "How long will that take?" "Give me a week, maybe 2. Can you wait that long?" I thought about waiting, about going to family dinners and pretending nothing had changed, about smiling and nodding while Victoria talked about her latest charity work and her interior decorating projects in the house that should have been partially mine. "I can wait," I said, "but Dave, when we're ready to move, I want to do it right." "What do you mean?" I want everyone to know what they did. I want the whole family to understand exactly who Victoria and Aunt Catherine really are. Sophia, I want them to be as humiliated as I was last night. I want them to know what it feels like to have their perfect image torn away in front of everyone they care about. The line was quiet for a moment. Then Dave sighed. "Okay, but promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll let me help you plan this, because if you're going to blow up your family, you want to make sure you survive the explosion." After we hung up, I sat in the courthouse parking lot for another hour, reading through the will again and again. I found Exhibit A, the list of Grandma's investment accounts. It was staggering. She'd been far wealthier than any of us had realized. But more than the money, I was fixated on something else. The date of the will, February 14th, 2024, Valentine's Day. I remembered that day clearly because I'd visited Grandma in the hospital. She'd been admitted for what the doctors called a routine procedure, something with her heart. Nothing serious, they'd said, but she'd been different that day, more serious than usual. She'd asked me about my writing, about whether I was happy, about my plans for the future, and then she'd said something that hadn't made sense at the time. "Sophia, Mija, I want you to know that you matter. You've always mattered to me. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I'd assumed she was just feeling sentimental because of the hospital stay, but now I wondered if she'd known something, if she'd suspected what would happen after she was gone. The thought made me angrier than ever. Grandma had tried to take care of me, had tried to ensure I'd be financially secure, and my own family had stolen that from me. Well, they were about to learn that some things couldn't be stolen forever. Dave's law firm occupied 3 floors of a glass tower downtown. I'd never been there before, but he'd insisted we meet at his office rather than somewhere public. Attorney-client privilege, he'd explained, though I wasn't technically his client, just in case. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that screamed expensive legal services, marble floors, leather furniture, oil paintings that probably cost more than my car. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s, smiled professionally. "Sophia Martinez, Mr. Chen is expecting you. Conference room 3. Dave was waiting for me with a stack of files and a laptop. He looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. Gone was the casual Dave who complained about his boss over coffee. This was Dave, the legal professional, and it was oddly reassuring. "Coffee," he offered, gesturing to a service cart in the corner. "Please, I have a feeling I'm going to need it." He poured us both cups from what looked like a very expensive machine, then sat across from me at the polished conference table. "I've been busy," he said, opening the first file. "The good news is that I've confirmed the will you found is legitimate, and was indeed the one probated by the court. And the bad news. The bad news is that your suspicions were correct. Based on the probate records, your cousin Victoria received and distributed assets in a way that was completely contrary to what the will specified." He slid a document across the table. "This is the inventory and appraisal that was filed with the court. It shows the total value of your grandmother's estate at the time of her death." I looked at the numbers. $2.8 million. The house was worth more than you thought. The real estate market has been crazy. But here's the interesting part. He pointed to another section. "According to the court records, Victoria filed an affidavit stating that she distributed the assets according to the will's specifications. But she didn't. No, she didn't, which means she committed perjury when she filed that affidavit." "What about James? Did he know?" Dave opened another file. "That's where it gets complicated. I did some digging into James's finances. Nothing invasive, just public records. He bought a new car in June 2024, 3 months after your grandmother's death. A Tesla Model S paid cash. How much does one of those cost? About $70,000. Where does a high school teacher get $70,000 in cash?" I felt sick. So he knew. "It looks like it. And there's more." Dave pulled out bank records. "I have a contact at the bank where your grandmother did her business. Hypothetically speaking, if someone were to look at the account activity after her death, they might find some interesting patterns." "What kind of patterns?" "Large cash withdrawals, transfers to accounts belonging to Victoria and James, wire transfers to luxury goods companies. And get this, there were several transfers to a company called Sterling Event Planning." "Victoria's birthday party?" "Probably. The timeline matches up. She literally used your inheritance to pay for the party where she snubbed you." I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of their betrayal. "What about Aunt Catherine? Was she involved?" "That's harder to prove, but almost certainly. She would have had to sign off on decisions about the house, about the furniture, about the personal effects. And she's been very vocal about supporting Victoria's generous decision to keep the family home. So all 3 of them knew." "I think so, but proving it in court would be difficult." James could claim he thought the inheritance was legitimate. Your aunt could claim she was just following Victoria's lead as executor. But Victoria is fucked, Dave said bluntly. Sorry, but there's no polite way to put it. She signed legal documents swearing she'd distributed the assets according to the will. She filed false affidavits with the court. She's looking at multiple felony charges if this goes to trial. I stared at the papers spread across the table. How much did they steal from me? Dave pulled out a calculator. According to the will, you should have received $500,000 in cash, plus the jewelry collection, plus a third of the remaining estate. Based on the inventory, that comes to approximately $1.4 million. Jesus. Plus interest, penalties, and punitive damages if you sue. You could be looking at a recovery of over $2 million. $2 million. Enough to buy my own house. Enough to quit freelancing and focus on the novel I'd been trying to write for years. Enough to finally feel secure. Dave, I want to be absolutely sure before I do anything. Is there any way they could have a legitimate explanation for this? He shook his head. I've been through the documents a dozen times. The will is clear, the inventory is clear, and the distribution records are clear. They stole from you, Sophia. There's no gray area here. Ooh, what are my options? You could file a criminal complaint. Embezzlement, fraud, perjury. The district attorney would have a field day with this. And your family would be destroyed. Victoria could go to prison. James could lose his teaching license. Your aunt could face charges as an accessory. Or you could file a civil lawsuit, demand restitution plus damages. It would be expensive and time-consuming, but you'd probably win. Would it be public? Court records are public, but it might not get media attention unless you wanted it to. I thought about that. What if I wanted it to get media attention? Dave gave me a look. Sophia, what are you thinking? I'm thinking about Victoria's birthday party, about how she stood up there and talked about family being everything while she was literally wearing jewelry bought with my inheritance money. You want revenge. I want justice. Sometimes they're the same thing, but sometimes they're not. I stood up and walked to the window. Dave's office had a view of the city, of the courthouse where I'd discovered the truth, of the neighborhoods where my family lived their comfortable, fraudulent lives. If I file criminal charges, what happens next? You'd go to the police, file a complaint, they'd investigate, probably arrest Victoria and possibly the others. Then it would go to the district attorney who would decide whether to press charges. How long would that take? Months, maybe years. And during that time, your family would know you were coming for them. They'd have time to prepare, to hire lawyers, to potentially hide assets. I turned back to Dave. What if I wanted to confront them first? What if I wanted them to know exactly what they'd done before I involved the authorities? That's risky. They could destroy evidence. They could try to pressure you into keeping quiet, until they could panic and do something stupid. Dave was quiet for a moment. Sophia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. How far are you willing to go with this? What do you mean? Are you looking for a financial settlement? Are you looking for justice? Or are you looking to burn everything down? I thought about the question, about Victoria's toast, about the erasure, about the years of feeling like I wasn't quite good enough for the family. About Grandma's house, stripped of all the memories that made it home. About the money that could have changed my life, sitting in Victoria's bank account instead. I want them to understand what they did, I said finally. I want them to face consequences, and I want everyone to know what kind of people they really are. That sounds like burning everything down. Maybe it is. Dave closed the files and leaned back in his chair. Okay, if that's what you want, I have an idea, but it's going to require perfect timing and nerves of steel. I'm listening. Your family has a reputation to maintain, right? They care about their image, their standing in the community. Absolutely. Aunt Catherine has been president of the Garden Club for 15 years. Victoria is on the board of 3 different charities. James coaches Little League. And they all socialize together. Family dinners, holiday parties, every month. Aunt Catherine hosts a family dinner on the last Sunday of every month. It's a tradition that goes back to when Grandma was alive. When's the next one? I checked my phone calendar. This Sunday, 3 days from now. Perfect. Dave opened his laptop. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make copies of everything, the will, the probate records, the bank statements, the inventory. We're going to put together a complete picture of what they did and how much they stole. And then you're going to go to that family dinner. You're going to smile and act normal. And when the time is right, you're going to calmly distribute copies of the evidence to everyone at the table. In front of the whole family. In front of the whole family. Let them try to explain themselves to their children, their spouses, their parents. Let them try to maintain their perfect image when everyone knows exactly what they did. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. What happens after that? After that, you give them a choice. They can make full restitution voluntarily, or you can file criminal charges. But either way, the secret is out. Either way, they can't pretend anymore. And if they refuse to pay, then you destroy them in court. But my guess is they'll pay. People like Victoria and your aunt, they care more about their reputation than their money. They'll pay to make this go away. I thought about it. About sitting at Aunt Catherine's dining room table, surrounded by the family who'd erased me, calmly destroying their world with the truth. I'll need help putting together the evidence packages. I'll handle that. Professional presentation, everything clearly labeled and explained. When you hand these out, there will be no doubt about what happened. What about James's kids? They'll be there. How old are they? Teenagers. 15 and 17. Old enough to understand what their father did. Old enough to know that actions have consequences. I nodded. Okay, let's do it. Are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back. Your family will never be the same. Good, I said, because the family I thought I had never existed anyway. We spent the next hour going through the evidence, making sure we had everything we needed. Dave would prepare the packets, and I would prepare myself for the performance of my life, because that's what it would be, a performance. I'd have to sit through dinner, make small talk, smile at their jokes, all while knowing I was about to detonate a bomb that would shatter their world. But as I left Dave's office that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. For the first time since Grandma died, I wasn't the forgotten granddaughter begging for scraps of affection. I was the one holding all the cards, and I was about to play them. Aunt Catherine's house sat on a tree-lined street in the kind of neighborhood where people still left their doors unlocked and knew their neighbors' names. I'd been coming here for monthly family dinners since I was 12 years old, when my parents divorced, and these gatherings became my main connection to Dad's side of the family. The house itself was a testament to Aunt Catherine's attention to detail. Perfectly manicured lawn, seasonal decorations, windows that sparkled even in the late afternoon sun. Everything about it screamed respectability and tradition. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes before getting out, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A simple navy dress that was nice enough for dinner, but not so fancy that anyone would think I was trying too hard. The manila envelope on my passenger seat contained 5 identical packets, each one meticulously prepared by Dave's team. Evidence of their crime laid out in terms so clear that even James's teenagers would understand. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "You sure about this? It's not too late to go the legal route instead." I typed back, "I'm sure. They made their choice when they erased me. Now I'm making mine." The front door opened before I could knock. Aunt Catherine stood there in a flowing floral dress, her silver hair perfectly styled, her smile as warm and welcoming as always. "Sophia, honey, come in, you look lovely." "Thank you, Aunt Catherine. I brought dessert." I held up a bakery box containing chocolate eclairs, Grandma's favorite. How thoughtful. Victoria and Marcus are already here, and James's family just arrived. We're going to have such a wonderful time. She led me through the familiar hallway, past the family photos that chronicled decades of birthdays, graduations, and holidays. I noticed there were several new photos from Victoria's birthday party, professional shots of her cutting the cake, laughing with friends, looking radiant in her emerald gown. The dining room was set with Aunt Catherine's best china. The table extended to accommodate all 9 of us. Victoria sat at the right hand of the head of the table, looking effortlessly elegant in a cream-colored cashmere sweater. Marcus was checking his phone as usual. James was at the other end with his wife Linda and their 2 kids, Tyler and Emma. "Sophia!" Victoria stood and came over to give me a hug. "I'm so glad you could make it. I feel like we barely got to talk at my party." "It was such a beautiful event," I said, accepting her embrace while fighting the urge to pull away. "You looked absolutely stunning." "Thank you, sweetie. I have to tell you, I got the most gorgeous thank you notes printed. The stationery was hand-pressed paper with gold foil accents. I'll show you after dinner." Of course she would. Victoria loved showing off her expensive things, especially to family members who couldn't afford them. "Uncle Robert couldn't make it," Aunt Catherine announced as she brought out a platter of appetizers. "He's still recovering from that flu that's been going around." My father's absence was probably for the best. He'd always been proud of his sister's success, proud of Victoria's accomplishments. This was going to be hard enough without watching him learn that his favorite niece was a criminal. "So, Sophia," Marcus said, barely looking up from his phone, "how's the writing going? Victoria tells me you're working on some kind of book." "It's going well," I replied, settling into my chair. "Actually, I've been doing a lot of research lately, digging into family history, legal documents, that kind of thing. You'd be amazed what you can find in public records." Victoria's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. "That sounds fascinating. Are you writing about our family?" "In a way." I placed my purse carefully beside my chair, making sure the manila envelope was easily accessible. "I'm exploring themes of inheritance, legacy, what we pass down to the next generation, both material and moral." "How literary," Aunt Catherine said, bustling back in with a wine bottle. "James, would you do the honors?" James stood to pour wine for the adults while his kids helped themselves to soda. Tyler, the 17-year-old, was already bored and scrolling through his phone. Emma, 15, was more attentive to the conversation. "I love family history stuff," Emma said. "We had to do a genealogy project for school. Did you know great-grandma Margaret came from Mexico when she was just 18? "I did know that," I said softly. "She was very proud of how hard she worked to build a life here. She used to tell me stories about saving every penny, about making smart investments so her family would be secure. She was an amazing woman," Victoria said, raising her wine glass. "So generous, so wise. Everything I do, I try to think about what she would have wanted. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Yes, she was very concerned about taking care of family, making sure everyone was provided for." "Well, she certainly succeeded," Aunt Catherine said proudly. "Look at all of us, gathered around this table. She'd be so happy to see how well everyone is doing." Dinner conversation flowed around me as I picked at my food. Victoria talked about her latest charity work, something involving a fundraiser for underprivileged children, which she was organizing from the comfort of Grandma's former house. James discussed his students' performance on standardized tests. Marcus occasionally grunted responses while continuing to work on his phone. I found myself studying their faces, looking for signs of guilt or conscience. Did they ever think about what they'd done? Did Victoria ever walk through that house and remember that it should have been mine too? Did James look at his Tesla and wonder if he deserved it? But there was nothing. They'd compartmentalized their crime so completely that they genuinely seemed to believe their own story. They'd convinced themselves that they deserved what they'd taken. "Sophia, you're quiet tonight," Linda observed. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking," I said. "Actually, I've been thinking a lot about Grandma lately, about her final wishes." "She lived such a full life," Aunt Catherine said. 93 years, and she was sharp right up until the end. "Yes, she was very sharp," I agreed. "Very specific about what she wanted. Very careful about making sure her wishes were documented properly." Victoria had gone very still. What do you mean? Just that she was the kind of person who planned ahead, who made sure all her legal documents were in order. I took a sip of wine, savoring the moment. Did you know she updated her will just a month before she died? The silence that fell over the table was deafening. James's fork clattered against his plate. Marcus finally looked up from his phone. What? Aunt Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. Oh yes, I continued conversationally. February 14th, 2024, Valentine's Day. I found it quite romantic, actually. Updating her will on the day of love, making sure the people she cared about most would be taken care of. Victoria's face had gone pale. Sophia, I don't know what you think you found, I interrupted gently. I found her will, the real one, the one she signed and had properly witnessed and notarized. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope. Would anyone like to see it? I think there's been some kind of mistake, James said quickly. Victoria handled all the estate matters. She would know if there were any other documents. Would she? I asked, looking directly at Victoria. Tell me, Victoria, when you submitted Grandma's will to probate court, what exactly did you submit? Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Aunt Catherine was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Mom? Emma looked confused. What's going on? Nothing, sweetheart, Linda said quickly, but her eyes were fixed on me with growing understanding. Oh, but it's not nothing, I said, standing up. It's really quite something. You see, I've spent the last week doing research, learning about probate law, about estate fraud, about what happens when someone lies to a court, about the contents of a will. I walked around the table slowly, placing a packet in front of each adult. Tyler looked up from his phone, finally sensing the tension in the room. What I found was fascinating, I continued. According to the will Grandma actually wrote, the one that's been sitting in the probate court files this whole time, she left specific instructions about how her estate should be distributed. Victoria's packet remained untouched in front of her. Sophia, please, let's discuss this privately. Oh no, I said, returning to my seat. We're family, remember? Family discusses things together. Family doesn't keep secrets from each other. I opened my own packet and began reading aloud. To my beloved granddaughter, Sophia Marie Martinez, I leave the sum of $500,000 from my investment accounts, along with my jewelry collection and all family photographs and documents. Emma gasped. Tyler put down his phone entirely. The remainder of my estate, I continued, including all other investment accounts, stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings, shall be divided equally among my 3 grandchildren. Stop, Victoria whispered. Equally, I repeated. That means Victoria should have inherited about $900,000 total. James should have inherited about $800,000, and I should have inherited about $1.4 million. Linda had opened her packet and was scanning the documents. Jesus Christ, James, is this real? I can explain, James started, but his voice cracked. Can you? I asked. Because I'm very curious about how you can explain filing a false affidavit with the probate court, how you can explain perjury, how you can explain stealing $1.4 million from your own cousin. We didn't steal anything. Victoria finally found her voice. Grandma wanted me to have the house. She told me so herself. Really? When? When she was in the hospital. She said she wanted me to take care of everything. Taking care of everything doesn't mean stealing everything, I said calmly. And it certainly doesn't mean lying to the court about what her will said. Aunt Catherine finally spoke, her voice shaking. Victoria, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't. I did what I thought was best for the family, Victoria said. But the words sounded hollow, even to her. You did what was best for you, I corrected. You took my inheritance and used it to fund your lifestyle, your party, your redecorating, your designer clothes. You literally stole from me and then flaunted it in front of my face. Marcus had been reading through the documents with the focused attention of someone who understood financial matters. "Victoria," he said quietly, "this is bad. This is criminal fraud." "Dad?" Emma's voice was small. "Did you really steal from Aunt Sophia?" James couldn't meet his daughter's eyes. "It's complicated, Emma." "No, it's not complicated," Tyler said, his teenage sense of justice cutting through the adult rationalizations. "It's stealing. You stole from family." "Now wait just a minute," Aunt Catherine started, but Linda cut her off. "Don't." Linda's voice was ice cold. "Don't you dare try to justify this. James, how could you? How could any of you?" "We'll pay it back," Victoria said desperately. "Sophia, we'll make this right. We'll give you what you're owed." "Will you?" I asked. "All of it? With interest? With penalties? Because according to my calculations, you owe me about $2 million now." The number hit the table like a physical blow. Marcus went pale. James made a choking sound. $2 million? Aunt Catherine whispered. "Plus the value of the jewelry collection you distributed among yourselves, plus the family photos and documents that were specifically left to me, plus punitive damages for the emotional distress of being erased from my own family." I stood up again, looking around the table at their stricken faces. "You want to know the worst part? It's not even the money, it's that you made me feel like I didn't matter. Like I was some kind of charity case you were being generous to by letting me take a few photos from Grandma's house." "Sophia, please." Victoria was crying now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen this way." "You never meant to get caught," I corrected. "There's a difference." What happens now?" James asked. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. "Now you have a choice. You can make full restitution, all of it, plus interest and penalties, within 30 days, or I can file criminal charges and let the district attorney sort it out." "And if we pay?" Victoria asked desperately. "If you pay, I'll consider the matter settled between us. But I want you to understand something." I turned back to face them one last time. "We're not family anymore. You made that choice when you decided I didn't deserve what Grandma left me. You made that choice when you erased me from your lives." "But Sophia," Aunt Catherine pleaded, "we are family. We'll always be family." "No," I said quietly. "Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie to each other. Family doesn't erase each other from existence." I walked to the front door, leaving them sitting around the table with the evidence of their crimes spread before them. As I reached for the handle, I heard Emma's voice, clear and disappointed. "I can't believe you guys did this. I can't believe you stole from her." Out of the mouths of babes. I drove home in silence, my hands shaking from adrenaline. I'd done it. I'd looked them in the eye and told them exactly what I thought of them. I'd stripped away their perfect facade and shown them, and their children, who they really were. My phone was already ringing when I walked into my apartment. Dave's name on the screen. "How did it go?" he asked. "Better than I hoped," I said, collapsing onto my couch. "You should have seen their faces when I started reading the will aloud. Any chance they'll pay?" "I think so." Marcus looked like he was calculating how much it would cost versus how much a criminal trial would damage his business reputation. "And Victoria? Victoria's going to pay because she can't stand the thought of everyone knowing what she did. She'd rather be broke than have her charity friends find out she's a fraud." "What about James?" I thought about James's stricken expression, about the way his kids had looked at him. "James is going to pay because his children will never forgive him if he doesn't." "Good. I'll draft the settlement terms tomorrow. Full restitution plus interest, plus return of any personal property that was specifically bequeathed to you." "Dave?" "Yeah? Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over until you have your money back." But as I hung up the phone, I realized it wasn't really about the money anymore. It was about justice. It was about looking my family in the eye and refusing to be erased. For the first time in over a year, I felt like I could breathe again. 3 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of First National Bank, holding a cashier's check for $2.1 million. The morning sun streamed through the glass windows, making the check's security features shimmer like a rainbow. Dave stood beside me, grinning like we'd just won the lottery, which, in a sense, we had. "I still can't believe they actually paid," he said for the third time that morning. "I can," I replied, carefully folding the check and placing it in my purse. "They're not stupid. A criminal trial would have destroyed all of them. Victoria would have lost her charity board positions, James would have lost his teaching job, and Marcus would have lost business clients who don't want to be associated with fraud. Still, 2.1 million. That's more than we initially calculated. That's what happens when you factor in interest, penalties, and the value of Grandma's jewelry collection they'd already distributed among themselves. The jewelry had been the hardest part to recover. Victoria had given pieces to Aunt, Catherine to Linda, even to Emma for her quinceañera. Getting it all back had required individual negotiations with each family member, accompanied by gentle reminders about accessory charges in felony cases. "What about the house?" Dave asked as we walked toward the exit. "That's more complicated. According to the will, it should be sold and the proceeds split 3 ways, but Victoria's living in it, and she's already put a lot of work into renovating it. So I'm going to let her buy out my share. She can keep the house, but she'll pay me market value for 1/3 ownership. That's generous of you. It's practical. I don't want to be co-owner of anything with Victoria. Clean break is better." We emerged onto the sidewalk where the late October air carried the smell of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. The city looked different to me now, brighter, full of possibilities. With $2 million in the bank, I could buy my own house. I could quit taking freelance assignments I hated. I could focus on my writing. Most importantly, I could stop feeling like I was always one crisis away from financial disaster. "Lunch?" Dave suggested. "My treat, though I guess you can afford to pick up the check now. You know what? Let's go somewhere expensive. Somewhere with a wine list and cloth napkins and waiters who don't roll their eyes when you ask questions about the menu. I know just the place." We ended up at Chez Laurent, a French restaurant downtown that I'd always wanted to try but never could afford. The kind of place where Victoria would have felt perfectly at home, but where I'd always felt like an imposter. Not anymore. "To justice," Dave said, raising his glass of champagne. "To family," I replied. "The kind you choose, not the kind you're born with." We clinked glasses, and I took a sip of champagne that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a week. It tasted like victory. "So what's next?" Dave asked. "Besides the house situation." "I'm moving," I said. "I found a place in the Arts District, a loft with huge windows and exposed brick walls, the kind of place I used to dream about when I was living paycheck to paycheck. And writing? I'm going to finish my novel, the one about family secrets and inheritance and the things people do when they think no one's watching. Sounds familiar? Fiction is just truth with better dialogue." My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt my stomach clench. "What is it?" Dave asked, noticing my expression. "Text from Victoria. She wants to meet." "About the house?" I read the message again. "She says she wants to apologize. In person. Do you want to see her?" I thought about it. Part of me was curious. What could Victoria possibly say that would matter now? But another part of me was tired of drama, tired of confrontation. I'd gotten what I wanted. I'd gotten justice. "Maybe," I said finally, "but not alone, and not at the house. I could come with you." "No, that would feel too much like bringing a lawyer to a family meeting." I paused. "Actually, that's exactly what it would be." "So where?" "Somewhere public, neutral ground." I typed back, "Coffee? Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Grind Coffee on 5th Street. Her response came immediately. "Thank you. I'll be there." "You sure about this?" Dave asked. "I'm sure. I want to hear what she has to say." The next afternoon, I arrived at Grind Coffee 15 minutes early and claimed a table in the corner where I could see the entire cafe. I ordered a latte and settled in to wait, my hands surprisingly steady. Victoria walked in at exactly 2 p.m., looking around nervously until she spotted me. She'd lost weight since the family dinner, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She was still beautiful, still put together, but there was something fragile about her now. "Sophia," she slid into the chair across from me. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Of course. Coffee? Please. Just black. I got up to order her coffee, using the time to study her reflection in the window behind the counter. She sat perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap, looking like she was preparing for a job interview or a medical diagnosis. Here you go, I said, setting the cup in front of her. Thank you. She took a sip, then set the cup down carefully. I wanted to apologize properly, without everyone watching. I'm listening. She took a deep breath. What we did was wrong. What I did was wrong. I knew it at the time, and I convinced myself it was justified because I was the one taking care of everything. But that was just selfishness disguised as responsibility. Why did you do it? Honestly, because I could. Because I was the executor, and I knew no one else would think to check the public records, because I thought you'd never find out. At least she was being honest. And James just went along with what I told him. He trusted me to handle everything properly. She looked down at her hands. I destroyed that trust. I destroyed a lot of things. Yes, you did. I know you probably can't forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt you. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But Victoria looked genuinely miserable, genuinely ashamed. The thing is, I said carefully, I don't think you're sorry about hurting me. I think you're sorry about the consequences. If you could go back and steal my inheritance again, but this time without getting caught, would you? She was quiet for a long moment. I want to say no. I want to believe I'm better than that, but I don't know if I am. At least you're honest about it. I've been seeing a therapist, she said suddenly, trying to understand why I did what I did, why I thought I deserved more than everyone else. And what did you learn? That I've been living in a fantasy, this idea that I was the golden child, the one who mattered most, the one who deserved the best of everything. And when Grandma died, I just took what I thought was mine. But it wasn't yours. No, it wasn't. She looked up at me. The therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies, that I've been so focused on maintaining my image that I lost sight of right and wrong. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to explain why I need to make amends beyond just paying you back. I waited. I'm stepping down from all my charity boards. I'm selling the house to pay you for your share, and Marcus and I are moving to a smaller place. I'm going to get a job, a real job, not just volunteer work. Why? Because I need to learn how to live without other people's money. I need to understand what it means to actually earn something, instead of just taking it. I sipped my latte, processing what she was telling me. What about Marcus? Marcus is not happy with me. We're in marriage counseling, but I don't know if it's going to work. He says he doesn't know who I really am anymore. Do you? I'm trying to figure that out. We sat in silence for a while, watching other customers come and go. Young professionals with laptops, students with textbooks, elderly couples sharing pastries, normal people living normal lives, not dealing with family betrayals and stolen inheritances. Victoria, I said finally, I need you to understand something. What you did to me wasn't just about money. You erased me from my own family. You made me feel like I didn't matter, like I was some kind of burden you were being generous to tolerate. I know. Do you? Because when I stood up at that family dinner and started reading Grandma's will, the look on your face wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. Like I was inconveniencing you by refusing to disappear quietly. She flinched. You're right. And I hate that you're right. I don't need your friendship, Victoria. I don't need us to be close again. But I need you to acknowledge that what you did was a choice. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding. A deliberate choice to steal from me. It was a choice, she said quietly. And it was wrong. Good. Because that's the only way either of us can move forward. I finished my latte and stood up. I have to go. I'm meeting with a realtor about my new place. Sophia, she looked up at me. For what it's worth, I'm glad you found out. I'm glad you fought back. I'm glad you didn't let me erase you. So am I. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the afternoon sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in months. Not because Victoria had apologized, but because I'd finally said everything I needed to say. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave. How did it go? Better than expected, I typed back, ready to start the next chapter. And I was. I had my money, my independence, and most importantly, my self-respect. I had a novel to finish, a new home to furnish, and a life to build on my own terms. For the first time since Grandma died, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new loft, laptop open on the kitchen island, putting the finishing touches on my novel. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows turned the brick walls golden, and I could hear the sounds of the city humming below. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find a delivery man with a large package. Sofia Martinez. That's me. I signed for the package and carried it inside, curious about what I could have ordered. When I opened it, I found a leather-bound photo album with a note tucked inside the cover. Sofia, the note read in Aunt Catherine's careful handwriting. I found this when I was cleaning out some old boxes. I thought you should have it. With love and regret, Aunt Catherine. The album was full of photos I'd never seen before. Pictures of Grandma as a young woman, photos of my father and Aunt Catherine as children, family gatherings from decades past. And there, scattered throughout, were photos of me as a baby in Grandma's arms, me as a toddler playing in her garden, me as a teenager helping her bake cookies for Christmas. In every photo, Grandma was looking at me with the same expression, pure love, unmistakable pride, the look of someone who saw potential and promise and infinite worth. The last photo in the album was from the previous Christmas, just 3 months before Grandma died. We were sitting together on her couch, her arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something someone had said. She was looking at me with that same expression of love, but there was something else there too, something that looked like determination. I think she knew even then that she needed to protect me. I think she knew that after she was gone, I'd need more than just her love to survive. I'd need her justice. I closed the album and set it carefully on my bookshelf, next to the copy of her will that I'd framed. Not as a reminder of what my family had done to me, but as a reminder of what Grandma had done for me. She'd given me more than money. She'd given me the tools to fight back, to demand what was mine, to refuse to be erased. And in the end, that was the greatest inheritance of all.